Mr. President, over the past several days, we've seen a number of stories about how Democrats plan to spend the year gearing up for November elections by making an issue out of economic hardships faced by Americans. In other words, instead of working on reforms that would actually help people overcome the challenges so many of them face in this economy, Democrats plan to exploit those folks for political gain. It's really pretty amazing when you think about it. We're now in the sixth year of the Obama administration. We all know the stock market's been doing great, so the richest among us are doing just fine. But what about the poor? What about working class folks? What about folks who work in industries that liberals don't approve of, like coal? How many of these Americans have been doing well during the Obama economy? Well, record numbers of them are having a perfectly terrible time. One indicator is the growth of the food stamp program. Consider this. Since the president took office, the number of Americans who've signed up for food stamps has literally skyrocketed. It's up almost half. And nearly 4 out of 10 unemployed Americans are literally trapped in long-term unemployment. What's worse, the poorest Americans are the ones who've often had the hardest time recovering in this economy. Yes, the president took office in the midst of an economic crisis. No one disputes that. But for many Americans, a terrible situation seems to have only gotten worse over the course of this administration. So for the president to turn around and try to blame his political opponents for the suffering we've seen out there, well, that takes a pretty good amount of nerve. It also assumes a collective case of national amnesia. It would take a collective case of national amnesia to reach those conclusions. Because remember, these are the same folks who gave us the stimulus, who gave us tax increases, who gave us Obamacare. All of it was done in the name of helping the little guy, in the name of greater equality. So what's it given us? It's given us this mess that we have in our country. Record numbers of long-term unemployed, record numbers on food stamps, people losing their health care plans, others seeing the premiums shoot up when they can least afford it, and now another call, one more call for a government fix. Washington Democrats have shown almost no interest for 5 years in working together on ways to create the kind of good, stable, high-paying jobs that people really want and need. This is a real disservice. First and foremost, to those who are struggling the most out there, from the college graduate who suddenly finds herself wondering why she's got huge student loan debts but no prospects of work, to the 50-year-old dad who's worked his whole adult life but suddenly can't find a job that meets either his needs or his potential. And yet this administration's proposed solution is just to slap another Band-Aid from Washington on it and call it a day. Yes, we should work on solutions to support those who are out of work through no fault of their own. But there's literally no excuse to pass unemployment insurance legislation without also finding ways to create good, stable, high-paying jobs and also trying to find the money to pay for it. So what I'm saying is, let's support meaningful job creation measures. And let's find a way to pay for these UI benefits so we're not adding to an already completely unsustainable debt. Unfortunately, the administration seems almost totally disinterested in solutions that don't put government in the lead. And it seems nearly incapable of working with those who don't share that belief. And that, in many ways, is precisely why we're in the situation we're in. Because it's only when you believe government is the answer to all of your problems that you talk about unemployment insurance instead of job creation, and the minimum wage instead of helping people reach their maximum potential. So it's time to get away from, quote, temporary government programs and give the American people the tools they need to drive an economy that truly works for them and for their families. We could start with one of the real bright spots in our economy, and that's energy, a field that's poised to help our economy create literally millions of jobs, if only the administration would get out of the way. Another area where we should be able to work together is health care. By almost any metric, affordability, accessibility, even the ratio of cancellations to enrollments, this law has imposed more pain and more distress than many had ever thought possible. Centrists, moderates, conservatives, just about any sensible person outside the congressional Democratic leadership here in Washington has long understood this. But now even the left is starting to come to grips with the painfully obvious fact that the law that it fell in love with can't possibly work. Last week, one of the great poobahs of the left admitted that Obamacare is awful, direct quote, calling it, quote, the dirty little secret many liberals have avoided saying out loud. I don't agree with this man on much else, including his broader ideas on health care, but it's good to hear a grandee of the left at least admit that this isn't working. And his words point to a larger truth, that the president's amen chorus had ample opportunity to speak truth to power when it mattered, and that most chose to remain silent. For that, the law's apologists have left the American people to pay the price. Let me read you part of a letter I recently received from Jennifer Bell, a constituent of mine in Hopkinsville. This is what she said. I have less coverage than I did before. I didn't get to keep my policy that I was happy with. Every dollar I have to pay more is a dollar taken from my family. I never thought that in America we would be forced to purchase something we cannot afford. We worked hard to get where we are. Now we're being forced to pay more in order to pay for somebody else's insurance. How is that fair? I hear you, Jennifer. Everyone on this side of the aisle hears those concerns. And here's something else. Many Kentuckians are finding that Obamacare is about more than just higher premiums and cuts to Medicare. It's also about a lack of access to doctors and hospitals. One of the most left-wing papers in my state recently ran a big story about how many Obamacare coverage networks exclude so many of the hospitals my constituents want to use. A few weeks ago, the majority leader basically said that criticisms of Obamacare amounted to jokes. Well, you might like to think this is all some joke, but the constituents who've been writing me about the consequences of this failed law don't see it that way. I know this must weigh heavily on our Democratic colleagues. I know they can't see so many Americans hurting because of decisions they made and feel absolutely nothing. Well, let me say this to our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. It's a new year and a time for new beginnings. So if you're ready to work with us, we're here. Together, we can start over on health care. Together, we can give the American people the kind of health reform they really deserve, reform that can lower costs and improve the quality of care. But just like with solving the problems of joblessness and unemployment, it's something we can only do together. Mr. President, I yield the floor.